Hey, it's Steve Lindsley. Welcome back to my shop. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made a cherry quilt rack. My friend and coworker Kim has a special quilt that she wants to display, and she showed me a picture of a quilt rack that she likes, so I did my best to come up with something that was reasonably the same. It's not exact, but it's close. I'm sure she'll be happy with it and get many years of good use out of it. The project involved some 8-quarter cherry and some 5-quarter cherry and some template routing and some other things. So it was a lot of fun to make. Even though there's not a lot of pieces to it, it was fairly challenging. So sit back, relax, and watch the video. I hope you enjoy it. To get started on this quilt rack project, my friend Kim pointed me to a picture of a quilt rack that she saw on the internet that she liked. It's kind of a contemporary design. So I took the picture and I blew it up to kind of a similar shape, not exact, but it's close. I blew it up on some poster board. The first one I didn't particularly like. I thought it was too straight, and this area right here didn't have enough curve to it, so I cut it off. Kept the bottom piece, but I cut that top part off, and I made one that's got a little bit more of a curve to it. We can see that there on that. There's what the bottom foot part looks like. So from that pattern, then I took a piece of 1/4-inch MDF and I laid it out on the MDF and traced around it. So that transferred our pattern to a piece of MDF, which we're going to use as a template for making the two ends for the quilt rack. So what I did was I also laid the mortises out now while I have them square edges, because it would have been pretty impossible to lay them out after if I'd cut it to shape. So I used the factory edge, which is this side, which is square to this bottom where the feet are. So we got a mortise at the bottom, then we got a couple of mortises up here at the top of the quilt rack. There's one there, and then there's one there at the top where the quilt drapes over. So we're going to take and we'll cut that out on the bandsaw, and then we'll true it up with some hand tools, probably a file and a rasp and some other things, because we're going to use this with the router as a template. So any waves or deviations it has, and it'll be transferred to our final piece, which we don't want to happen. The material for this project is cherry, and I went to my local hardwood dealer yesterday, and I got a piece of 8-quarter cherry. Let me see if I can move the camera a little bit. It's just a big piece of cherry, and it's a nice piece. It's got nice. I think it's going to look really nice as I make this. So I should be able to get the 2 feet and the sides out of this piece, and I got another piece of cherry for the cross pieces. So the next thing to do is to cut out the template on the bandsaw and start getting that trued up. Alright, in this clip I show how I cut the 8-quarter cherry down to size. I just used the chop saw. I muted the sound because the vacuum cleaner and the sound of the saw was rather annoying, so I spared everybody the sound of that. So it's just, like I said, just me cutting the cherry into a manageable size. Alright, well, we got our pieces cut to size, and I just got them laid here together. This bottom piece I've made 5 inches wide. There's got to be a joint somewhere in this project, so I just arbitrarily picked up 5 inches from the bottom, just to it'll look like a good spot where the transition of the curve starts. I got it laid out. I got it traced around the template. We're going to go ahead and glue these pieces together before we cut it out on the bandsaw. It would be nearly impossible to clamp it up securely once we did that. Now I got to connect this joint somehow mechanically because this is end grain on this side and straight grain on this side, so that's typically not that strong of a joint. So we could use a mortise and tenon to do that, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and use biscuits. This is a number 20 biscuit. You can see that the line on this side is here and the line on that side is there, so it's plenty of room in the center there for a biscuit. I'm going to put probably 2 biscuits, just because it's the piece is so thick. I don't think one's going to do it, so I'll put double biscuits in the piece, and we'll glue it together, like I said, before we cut it out on the bandsaw. So the next thing to do is get the biscuit joiner out and cut a couple of biscuit slots, and then we'll kind of go from there. We got the biscuit slots cut in the boards here, so we're ready to go ahead and glue them up. I won't bore you with that. It's gluing up is almost right up there with sanding. So we'll put a number 20 biscuit in the each of the slots there, and glue these pieces together. And then tomorrow we'll let them set overnight, and then tomorrow we can go ahead and cut out the shape on the bandsaw, and then get ready to route it with the template and the router. All right, I got the boards out of the clamps. They were in the clamps overnight. I went ahead and sanded them with some 80 grit and some 120 just to flush up the joints so I get a nice tight fit between the 2 boards. I laid the pattern on where I wanted and went ahead and traced around it. I was able to move it around a little bit, get it to where I wanted, so I could avoid some of these like defects in the wood here. So I got a nice grain match on the piece. So we're happy with that. So next thing to do is go ahead and take it to the bandsaw and cut it out. All right, we got the legs pieces cut out at the bandsaw. I tried to stay just outside the line on the pieces. Here's the foot. It came out pretty good. So now what we need to do is flush these up. So we're going to take our template. I got some double stick tape on like 4 spots here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this on the piece, and we want it flush with the bottom of the feet. Let's see if we can get it. We're just going to feel it here. All right, that's pretty good. That's good up there. So, all right, so we got that on there. Now what I'm going to do is, I got the pin nailer, and I got some 1/2-inch pins in the pin nailer. What we're going to do is where I marked out the mortises, we're going to put in a couple of pins. And those will pull, when we take the template off, those will pull right through, and then we can just take them out. So it'll work out pretty well. And last piece. Alright, well here's my setup for routing this. What I didn't want is to have the router on this just narrow piece here, and this narrow piece, and have it being tippy or whatever. So what I did was I took one of the cutoffs from the leg, and I put a piece of MDF on it the same thickness, so these two are the same, so I can use that to balance the router as I trim that. It's not so bad on this side because I can kind of push back on it and got a little bit of grip there, but on that flip side it's difficult, and I didn't want to be rocking the router around. So this is the router I'm going to use. It's set at 18,000 RPM, so we're going to go ahead here and start it up and make a couple of cuts. Alright, we're finished up with the first bit, and we got a pretty good cut. We got a little bit of burning in here, and a little bit, I don't know if you can see it down here on this leg where it changes from side grain to end grain. A little bit of chip out right there, but we'll clean that up. Overall, it wasn't a bad cut. We got a little bit of, like I said, a little bit of burning, and for me it's hard to cut cherry at all and not get any burning, so we need to change bits and go ahead and finish this thing up. The part that we've already fleshed up is on the bottom, and this bearing on the bottom here is going to ride on that bottom part that we've already cut, and it's going to trim off what's left, and we're going to have a nice finished piece here. So let's give it a shot. Here's our two pieces. We got them all fleshed up. They got a little bit of burning here and some up here, a little bit of chip out right there, which will sand off. What I'm going to do is I think I'll clamp them together and then sand it as one big wide piece. They came out pretty good. They're as close as you can get with the process we used, I think. So next thing up is to sand them. Which is always my favorite thing. Alright, I've taken my template and I've chiseled out the mortises where I had them had them laid out, and I put the pattern on each of the pieces, and I trace around the inside to give myself the mortise on each piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill these out. I got a 3/8" Forstner bit in the drill press. We're going to go ahead and remove most of the waste with the drill with that, and then we'll square them up with a chisel. I got the depth set for just a little over 5/8 of an inch, which is the length of the tenon that I'm going to put on the cross pieces. So we're going to go ahead and drill this out. Well, that's all there is to that. We left enough around the edges here that we can just take a chisel and clean that up, but most of the waste in the center is gone. So I'll go ahead and do the other two mortises on this leg and the others on the other leg, and then we'll be good to go. Well, we got our mortises cut out in the bottom of our legs down here. We got them cut out at the top as well. So we're in pretty good shape with these pieces. So the only thing next to do is to cut our stretchers to size and then start cutting some tendons. Here's the quilt rack all dry fitted together. The joints came out pretty nice there. Everything's nice, tight fit, so that's a good thing. Next thing to do is break it apart and round over the tops of the stretchers. I think I'll use a 3/8" round over bit on the top of the stretcher and maybe something different on the bottom of the stretchers, and then I'll have to do something with the sharp edges on the legs. I'll probably round them over. I'm not undecided at this point how much. Maybe just enough to knock off the sharp edge and give it a little softer feel. So, all right, we're gonna break this thing down, get the router table out, and start rounding over the stretchers. We'll just finish routing the roundovers on our full-length pieces. This is one of the test pieces, but it's got the same profile on it. What I did was on the top part, I did a 3/8 inch roundover, which kind of softened that top edge. And then on the bottom of the piece, we did a 1/4 inch roundover, which softens that edge as well, but not as much, so it doesn't make the piece look like an oval or whatever. So it's still kind of retained a nice shape there. So it's got a nice shape on the side. It's going to take some sanding to get it all cleaned up and everything, but we'll get that taken care of. And I'm ready to round over the edges of the legs. What I have is a trim router with a 3/16 inch roundover bit in it. The 1/8 inch didn't seem like enough roundover, and 1/4 seemed too much, so the 3/16 seems about right. So we're just going to use the trim router. We're going to round over the edges. I'll show a little bit of this, but it's pretty much rinse and repeat once you see a little bit of it. So here we go. All right, well, that's all there is to that. It'll take some sanding once I get it done, but it's puts a nice little edge on there, so we're good to go. Well, here's our quilt rack all dry fitted for the last time. Got the clamps where I want them. It's always good to have a clamp strategy before you put the glue on a final piece. I found that the 2 top clamps work best on this side, and if the bottom one was on the back side, as you can see there. For some reason, if I put all the clamps on one side, it kind of opened up the couple of the joints, so I just switched them back and forth, and it straightened everything out, and everything's the way it's supposed to be. So we're getting ready to go ahead and put some glue on this piece and glue it up. All right, it's time to put some finish on this project. What I did was I made up some sample boards and sent them to Kim. She lives down in the Atlanta area, so she called me up and told me which combination of colors that she liked. The sample boards were various combinations of general finishes, light brown and medium brown mixed with some cinnamon. The cinnamon gives it a little bit of a reddish tone, so it's rather whether you really like the lighter brown or the medium, and she liked the medium brown. So the combination she liked was 1 part medium brown and 1 part cinnamon. So that's what we're going to use on our project, and I have some of that made up here in a jar, equal parts of that, so that'll be good. Before I even put any finish on it, what I did was I put on 2 coats of this blotch control, which is, you can't read the label, it's all kind of messed up, but I get it from Charles Neal, who's a woodworker in Virginia and has a website, and this helps control blotching in cherry and other woods. Cherry and some of the others are notorious for blotching when you try and dye them or stain them or whatever. So this really helps a lot. So what I did was I put 2 coats of this on our project and 2 coats on the sample boards that I sent. So well, here's our project with our dye put on it. I did film actually putting a dye on, but unfortunately my camera on my phone went wonky or something. I don't know, but it didn't record. So all I did was wiped it on with a rag and a stain pad. Just put on a fairly liberal amount and keep it wet till you can wipe it off. And I just use paper towels to wipe it off with. So I think it came out pretty nice. The combination of the medium brown dye and the cinnamon dye, I think really makes a nice looking finish. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this dry overnight, and then tomorrow we're going to spray on a few coats of lacquer, maybe glaze it a little bit, and then spray on some final coats of lacquer, and then this project will be finished. Well, I wound up spraying on 3 coats of lacquer. I used an Ehrlich's 5500 spray station. I don't do a lot of spraying, so my technique sometimes is a little to be desired, but it's lacquer's pretty forgiving, so the coats flowed out nice, and it turned out to be a real nice finish. Well, that's how I made this cherry quilt rack for my friend Kim. I'll put some photos up at the end of the video so you can get a better idea what it looks like. It was a lot of fun to make, and I'm sure she'll get many years of good use out of it. So, thanks for watching. Comments are always welcome, and please don't forget to subscribe.